You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 38. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm Katie Wardrobe, a music technology education trainer, speaker and consultant from midnightmusic.com.au, where I help music teachers use technology effectively in music education. In this episode, I'm going to share some music tech advice, and it's not actually from me, but it's actually from other music teachers. I recently posted the following question on my Midnight Music Facebook page, which was, what's one piece of tech-related advice you would give to another teacher? Now, I got lots of great responses. It was so nice to see all these people kind of get involved with that question, and teachers from all over the world contributed their ideas and shared tips, and some even shared more than one, which was nice to see. The responses were so good that I decided to dedicate a whole episode of the podcast to this topic and share the advice with you here. Now, it was interesting to see a number of common themes amongst the responses, and I kind of divided things up into around 6 main topic areas. And as I said, it was really great to see the same sorts of ideas coming from people. I think a lot of people were speaking from experiences, good or bad, and they're things that they are now keeping in mind as they go forward with technology activities with their students. If you want to see a full list of these tips actually written out and also perhaps download a copy to keep, you can find that at the show notes page for this episode, which is midnightmusic.com.au/38. So let's get started with the tips. Now, the first one I've got the heading of, it's not about the technology. So this might surprise you that a lot of the, some of the music tech advice that came from people was that it's not about the technology. And I've put this one first because it's probably the one that I think is the most important aspect of using technology. My friend Barbara Friedman, who's in the States and who I've had on the show before and mentioned a number of times, has a little motto that she goes by, and it is, teach music, the technology will follow. And really, this is, I think, what everybody should be thinking about. It's an overarching approach to using technology in that it's not about the technology. I often hear the question asked, I've got, say, new iPads or I've got Chromebooks. What good apps are there that I should be getting? And often my response is, what is it that you want to teach? Because that then leads to how the technology might fit into that. And maybe sometimes it doesn't fit in and therefore don't use the technology. Michael Medvinsky also posted something along the same lines. He said, think about the authentic processes. If that requires tech, then use tech. If it does not, don't. And he actually put hashtag Barbara Friedman at the end, so quoting her in that same sort of way. Brenda and Mario also made comments along these same lines. Brenda said, focus on teaching music, not technology. View technology as a tool in teaching, recording and creating. And Mario, once again, similar sort of concept, says only use ICT when it enables you to do something that you couldn't do without it, innovation, or when it enables you to do something that you did before but with less effort, less time or less money, and that's economy. And I love this kind of way of thinking about technology. Really, it's fantastic if it allows you to do something that you couldn't already do before, or maybe do it in a different way or a more engaging way. That's a great time to actually incorporate technology. And of course, productivity is a big part of using technology as well. And not everything will do both innovate and help you productivity-wise, but often technology does one or the other. And I think that second point about being more productive as a result of technology is a great way to think of it. And, and sometimes I even test out productivity tools or apps, and I find they are not saving me any time. So I do a little test, and if it's not saving me time, I will ditch that idea and go back to how I was doing it. But there are lots of things that I use technology for productivity and that creative side. Now, the second topic area is what I've called simple, straight-up tips. And a few people contributed these types of tips, which were just simple things that we all know we should do or do, or perhaps, again, you've been burnt in the past and now you are very clear on making sure that you do this thing all the time. So George Hess chimed in with Google is your friend. I love this one. And it seems like a redundant thing to say, but honestly, so many people kind of automatically go and ask somebody for an answer to a question where a lot of us most of us have access to Google or some sort of search tool on us all the time. And really, if you just take a couple of moments to Google, you'll get lots of examples of solutions to your problems, articles that people have written, videos often walking you through how to solve a problem or giving you the information that you need. And I'm going to just mention that I even Google things like, and I'm sure George does this too, if you get an error message that pops up, say on your laptop, an error message pops up in the software program that you're using and you can't immediately solve it yourself, I actually copy and paste exactly what's in that error message and just put that into Google and press enter. And inevitably, someone else has had that same error message and has wondered how to fix it. And then there will be some sort of forum solution discussion around that or an article that's been written. Often a YouTube video. I find that really, really useful. Mario, who contributed a couple of things, put KISS, keep it simple, and you can fill in whichever version of the last letter that you like there. Again, I love this tip too. Keeping it simple is great. Sometimes we overcomplicate things, and technology can kind of make you think about doing things in a more complex way. And sometimes it's just good to be less complex and think about keeping things very simple. And I like to take this approach when learning new things too. So rather than trying to dive in the deep end with a big project with students, just start off with one tiny thing, one small aspect. Maybe in your classroom, you might just want to introduce one tiny little new activity or one tool that replaces something else that you've been using. And keeping it simple like that means that you're taking baby steps, you incorporate something new into your repertoire, and then you build on that. Martin Emo, who's from New Zealand and is my community liaison person in my online community, who's so helpful for people in there. He said, read the manual or follow the YouTube tutorial. And I know so many of you out there do not like reading manuals. I'm one of those weird people who actually quite enjoys reading the manual. And I know a lot of people laugh when I say that, but when I was using Sibelius a lot, I actually used to have the Sibelius reference manual on my bedside table. I know, nerd moment here. But I found it really useful just to pick it up and flick to some kind of chapter at some point and just read a little bit. And I would find so many useful things that way. I would read something and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been doing it another way all this time. And the thing that I had just read meant that I was going to save a lot of time with my use of the software. I'm not suggesting that you go and grab software manuals for everything that you're using and keep them by your bedside. And I don't do that anymore. Maybe I've seen the light somehow, but it can be really useful to read the manual. Maybe read through the instructions. Often you can work out the way to do something in a software program, but it's not always the best way. Software has a tendency to allow you to do the same thing in multiple ways. And once again, I'll use Sibelius just as an example, but when I teach Sibelius workshops, there are probably 6 or 7 ways at least to enter notes into Sibelius, to get notes into the program. It's not always useful for people to know all of those. 2 or 3 of them are the ways that I think that they should know and are the most effective ways or the most useful ways. And so that's what I teach in workshops now. I don't go through all the different options. So if you can take some time and occasionally read a manual or watch a YouTube video on something, you might find that there's something really cool that you've been missing all this time. Ron chimed in with a similar thing and said, read the instructions, and he added at the end, then reboot. And Leslie, along the same line, said, restart your computers often. And this is so true. I actually find as a Mac user, Mac laptops particularly, you can shut the lid and reopen and just kind of pick up where you left off. PCs, you tend to be a bit more in the habit of shutting them down completely. At least I have been in the past. And, you know, if you go for a long time without restarting your computer, it ends up not being a great thing. So whenever I'm having a few issues with my Mac, I don't know, things are maybe a bit slow or something going wrong, that's one of the first things I do. And I know it's kind of a bit like a joke thing. You know, everyone goes, yeah, just restart the computer. Often it actually does help. So do that. Just restart, you know, every couple of days is a good thing if you can at least. Maybe get into the habit of shutting down every night. Probably not a bad idea. Turn off the technology, put a line in the sand and say you're done for the day. Now, Maribel offered a tip up, which is something that I use. And a lot of the things that people said in this post, you know, the responses to this post were, I loved them so much because there are a lot of the things that I've picked up over the years or learnt from bad experiences. And Maribel said, queue up as much as you can before classes. Now, I'm going to sort of fill in some gaps here because I'm not quite sure exactly what she was referring to, but I'm going to take a guess that this is to do with things like getting software programs open and ready and logged in, websites open, maybe videos up and ready. And once again, whenever I'm presenting or in front of a group of people, I do try to do this ahead of time. It might just take me 30 seconds before people are walking into a room. I even do it while people are getting settled. And it's a great thing, especially if you're going to show a series of websites. I actually open them up in separate tabs in Chrome. That's the browser that I use the most. And I will even put the tabs in order from left to right that I'm going to show them in the workshop. It just makes it so much easier. Having them queued up means that there's less downtime while you're switching to the new activity, because we all know that downtime equals the opportunity for students to start talking to one another or get distracted or, get their minds off onto something else or kill some time somehow. So the more you can have queued up and ready to go, the quicker you can switch to the next activity. And I really do find that that works very, very well. Now, Dale contributed the tip to turn off auto update, and I have actually mixed feelings about this one. I have auto updates turned on my phone, so my phone apps automatically update. I will wake up in the morning and the phone wakes up and I can see that they've updated or see them actually in the process of updating. I do tend to not do that on my iPad, simply because sometimes an update that happens perhaps when I'm not expecting it will kind of mess up a presentation or workshop that I'm about to run, or maybe a video I'm about to make on that app. So I do like to see what updates are there and available, and I will choose to do them then, or maybe wait a little bit. With my Mac operating system and PC operating system, with the Mac ones particularly, I tend to hold off a little bit before I update my entire operating system when a new version comes out. And the main reason for that is if you jump onto those updates really quickly, sometimes the software developers have not yet had a time to catch up to make their software workable in the new version of the operating system. And once again, I tend to not want to be putting myself at risk if I'm about to do a big presentation or something somewhere. I need to know that all the software is going to work. So I tend to wait a little while. I actually have a number of friends who are Mac users and they jump on operating system updates a lot quicker than I do, and I let them be the test bunnies. So I let them do that, and then I will, perhaps if I'm about to go and do it myself, I'll actually ask a question in the Facebook group, something like, who's updated? Have you found any software that's not working anymore? Because sometimes software will cease to work from that version onwards. So just be wary of that. And I know not all of you will have control over that sort of thing, because if you're working on school-owned devices, sometimes updates are completely out of your control anyway, and the school will take care of those. And sometimes they do them frequently, sometimes they do them infrequently, or once a year sometimes at places, I know. And so if you have the choice, just be mindful, I guess, of that. Connor's tip was to have an assortment of cables available at all times. You never know when you're going to have to make something work. And I, again, totally agree with this. I have learnt to travel around to different places that I go to with a little kit of just in case cables and adapters and things like that. So I don't need them all the time, and I have reduced this kit down a little bit over time. But I have things like the MP3 cable, like it's a 3.5 mil cable. I will have a couple of those in my bag at all times. They kind of, I've got one which is like an extension lead version of that in case I need a little bit more length on the audio cable that's got to plug into my laptop. I have a couple of small adapters for things like VGA cables that I need to plug into. I have the full range of all Mac adapters, dongles, that will allow me to plug into different types of data projectors. So I've got an HDMI one, I have a VGA one for my laptop. I have those two same things for my iPad to plug into those different data projector setups as well. And I've got a few other bits and pieces. I've got I have a few pairs of spare headphones. So when I'm working in a workshop and teachers come along and they don't have headphones to use, I have some spare ones and they can choose to use those or not. And just a few other bits and pieces. And I do find it's really useful the number of times that, you're suddenly trying to set yourself up somewhere and you haven't got something or it's not there in the room. And then you go, oh, hang on, I may have that in my bag. That's happened a lot of times and I've gotten myself out of issues with that. So do think about doing that. Perhaps in the future I'll share with you the list of things that I think are really useful to have as sort of your minimum kit. Now, Travis's tip was another simple one. Check the power cord first when troubleshooting. I'm guessing that this has probably happened in the past where you think, man, something's gone wrong, and you go, like I have, you go through all of these different steps to work out what on earth is the reason for your, device, your machine, your whatever it is that you're using. Why is it not working? And then inevitably, the last thing you do is go, oh, I wonder if it's plugged in properly or whether it's switched on properly. And you feel really silly when you get to that point and it's not plugged in or it's not switched on. So do that. It's, again, a really good thing. It's like having a little mental list of what can I just double check before I panic and go and call someone in for help. And Daniel shared a really funny one as well, I thought. And once again, I have also learnt from bad experience with this. Daniel said, turn off your alerts before connecting to a classroom projector. He actually gave a couple of examples, and I've had this issue too in the past where if you have your alerts on, this is things like calendar reminders and things like that. If you are plugged into a data projector, of course, everybody else gets to see your alerts, and you need to be very careful about what those might be when they're popping up. Daniel said, and I'll quote this, he said, I was once running the projector for backdrops on the cyclorama for a school production of Swan Lake when a window popped up asking if I wanted to update my antivirus software right in the middle of the performance. And he says even worse, another example, even worse was when the principal was using his personal laptop for a presentation at a whole school assembly and received an email from an angry parent. So once again, if you are the sort of person that has your emails kind of showing you a preview and they pop up over your screen, I've not had that on for years now. I have definitely turned that off on my all my devices, actually, iPad and laptop and phone as well. But once again, you need to be just sort of aware. If I'm plugging in my iPad or phone into something, I will often just go into airplane mode so that I don't get those things popping up. Or do not disturb mode is really good as well. And you need to just be, mindful of what it is that you're doing. Airplane mode is not going to be useful if you need to show things which are online. But go in and turn your alerts off. You have control over all those notifications that might pop up. And I personally choose not to have almost any of them show up on my laptop just generally while I'm working or when I'm presenting too, because I find them distracting. So I prefer to not be distracted from whatever task I'm working on at the time and choose to have them off. The third topic area is to have a contingency plan. And this is another favourite of mine. I've spoken about this in previous podcast episodes. So important, especially with technology, is to have a contingency plan. Sheggy says, always have a backup plan for when it doesn't work. And I agree, you need to kind of think about what is the worst case scenario. If you're relying on the internet for your technology-based lesson, what is it that you're going to do if the internet is down that day or slow or just not working or whatever other reason? Sometimes the internet is working, but for some reason it's just sluggish, and that is almost as bad as it not working at all. So do have a backup contingency option. Jenny said a similar thing, never depend on the technology, always have a tech-free backup plan. And I truly do this. All my workshops are technology-based. Everything I do is tech-based, and I have a tech-free plan for everything. And I have to say that it doesn't always have to be a completely tech-free plan. My plan is that if the technology is not working quite the way I want it to, my next best thing, and it's not ideal, but my next best thing is to go into show and tell mode, as I would call it, where it's just me showing the group of people. It's not as good. I want people to do hands-on stuff, but occasionally if the technology is not working, my show and tell version is my next best option. So the time that I would use that is, for instance, if I'm in a venue and the Wi-Fi goes down, I will get my own laptop online by just using my personal hotspot through my phone, and then I will just do show and tell with the group. If they are able to do a personal hotspot with their own device as well, then that's cool. They can join in as well. But I go into show and tell mode just so that we're still moving forward. I will also have in my head what are other options that we can do which don't involve the technology. So it's really good. I think once you have that in your mind all the time, technology is a lot less scary because it's never going to be a bad thing. If you've always got a contingency, you've got something else to do, and it's okay. Now, Bronwyn says, sort of sarcastically / tongue-in-cheek, I'm hoping, expect that it will all be exciting and fun and suck you in. You'll think you're a tech genius, and then whilst in front of a group of impatient children, it will all have the mother of all meltdowns and stuff up. And I'm taking that to mean that that's happened to poor Bronwyn in the past, and I think we've all been in that situation where you get so excited about something and then things do go wrong. And again, this for me falls back on have a contingency plan. And to me also, one of my other tips that I've probably mentioned before too is to test things out yourself first before you get in front of a group. And I'm not saying that Bronwyn has done this. She's probably tested it out herself. But I found that sometimes if I haven't run through things myself ahead of time, I haven't identified the pitfalls and the things that could possibly go wrong. And when I do run through it myself completely from start to finish, I know exactly what might go wrong for everybody else that's about to do it the next day in the workshop, in the class, with the students or whoever it is you're working with. So have the contingency, run through it ahead of time, identify pitfalls if you can, and work out what you'll do if you get to those things and you need to fix stuff along the way. Now, Daniel's mentioned, second tip from Daniel mentioned that never trust your internet connection. If you want to show something from the internet, download it first. And yep, this won't work for everything. Obviously, if it's an interactive website, which is like software, that's not going to help in that situation. But I'm guessing that in this scenario, he's probably referring to things like maybe videos that you want to show. If the video is a very important part of your lesson, perhaps having a version of that video locally on your laptop is going to be much better. I definitely do this if it's a keynote speech, for instance. I don't like to link, in my keynote presentation a file or PowerPoint file, I will never link to an online version of a video. I will always have a version of that video locally stored on my laptop. It will end in tears if you're in front of, 200 or 300 people or more and you're trying to connect to the internet to show a video. Not a great scenario. So having it locally on your laptop is a great tip. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. Now the next section is I've titled Go Paperless. Now there were two people who contributed paperless or tips for going paperless, and I really like this, and these are quite in-depth responses. I wanted to read a couple of these out. Now the first one was from Josh, who says, and I'll quote this: "If you're interested in downsizing your leaning tower of paper," and he's capitalized those like it's a big thing, which I think it is for a lot of people. He says, "Consider getting a Windows 10 tablet with a pen and using OneNote as your digital filing cabinet for storing everything digitally. Programs, resources, lesson plans, class assessments, you name it, it can be done in OneNote. There are many things that kids need to do practically, but the day-to-day teacher admin can be cut in half time-wise once you get familiar with OneNote. I share a OneNote notebook with a colleague and we use it for sharing lesson ideas, posting photos and videos of student work for showing how we're meeting standards, and knowing where I can immediately find such and such document that I filed 5 weeks ago." So I love this idea. Now, Josh has mentioned that he's on Windows 10 with a tablet and a pen and he's using OneNote. However, if you don't have Windows, you don't use OneNote and you don't have a tablet, don't worry, because there are lots of different ways of going this paperless route and storing stuff like he's mentioned digitally. So that's one solution. I want to just share Anna's solution because she mentioned a similar sort of thing. She says that her tip is to use Evernote for lesson plans, notes, anything or any other note-taking. Sorry, I misread that. Any other note-taking. I now have 6 years worth of lesson plans in my Evernote, and they're all searchable with YouTube links to audio files, etc. when necessary, screenshots of sheet music, the whiteboard, and so on. And it's free. Now, Anna and Josh are both doing similar things. They're storing all this information digitally. So Josh's solution, as we mentioned, was Windows 10 with OneNote, and OneNote will work on any Windows device. Anna, however, is using Evernote, but it's in a similar way. So Evernote is a software program which is free to use, and you can download it on your Mac or your PC, or you can use it online. Can you use it online? Actually, I'm thinking out loud now. I'm just thinking whether it would work on a Chromebook. Not quite sure about that, but I might check and pop that in the show notes and just tell you there. But you can definitely use it on iPad and on your phone. And Evernote's like a digital filing system. So you can basically store notes in there, information, you can link things in there, you can store text. And I have been using Evernote myself for many years. I've actually moved away from that, so I'm going to offer a third solution here, and that is to simply use Google Drive or Google Apps for Education. I know many of you are using that. I've actually moved more towards Google Drive for this purpose, but again, I store everything digitally. It's all searchable, really easy to share with other people. So the idea here, I think, one of the things that made me tip over to this system and made me think about typing text-based documents in a different way was that I realised I didn't need everything to look pretty. So this was me making the break from using something like Microsoft Word for typing text, notes or documents out to using something different like Evernote or Google Drive or OneNote or whatever it is that you're choosing to use. I realised and had this sort of revelation that Microsoft Word and other similar software to that is really useful when you need things to look pretty. You need to present it in some way. It's an essay that you're submitting, or it's a document that you need to look nice. It's maybe a worksheet. But a lot of text that I was typing and wanting to store digitally, I didn't need it to look that pretty. So for me, outlines for a workshop day, that are just going to be used by me, myself, I didn't need that to look nice. And I found that Evernote was a fantastic place to store this information. And the main reason is that within Evernote, like Anna mentioned, it's so easy to search for things. You start off even using Evernote or some tool like that, feeling the need to still store it and order everything into groups, or Evernote calls it notebooks, or into folders and similar systems like that. I've actually even moved away from that now because it's so searchable. So as long as you put words into your document that are easy to find later on, and this is where maybe naming conventions come into it, you'll be easily able to find stuff. So for instance, I've used naming conventions for documents or for notes, digital notes, for a long time now. And this works really well. So for instance, I'll use lesson plan as an example. If you were going to type a lesson plan into one of these tools, I would start the title of that lesson plan with a consistent few letters at the beginning. And this could be an abbreviation to describe what it is. So for lesson plan, it might just be the letters LP. And then you might type the title of the lesson plan, and you might even put perhaps the grade level that it's for. If you start every single lesson plan with LP, you can type LP into your search bar and see an instant list of every single lesson plan that you've devised and written in there. Now, you could go a little bit further, and instead of putting just LP at the beginning, you could put LP K2. That might be all your lesson plans, which are for K to 2 students. You might start off with that little abbreviation at the beginning. And then when you type that into the search bar, all of those will pop up together. Now, this is just one way of digitally organising your information. There's lots of other ways you can do this, and it doesn't have to necessarily be with the abbreviation at the beginning of the document. But that's just one little tip that I've picked up over time. So a lot of my work-based documents, business-based things, have some kind of abbreviation at the beginning so that they can be easily found and sorted and brought up all together in a big long list. Now, if the system that you're using, whether it's OneNote or Evernote or Google Drive, has an opportunity to put things into folders, once again, that's probably a good thing. That does make it easier, and it's easy to browse things if you've got this sort of folder set up where things are organised. But it's all about kind of taking a little time to think about how to digitally organise things first, and then going ahead and implementing that system and being really consistent so that when you use this, you can easily find stuff in the future. I constantly think about it as thinking of my future self. What is it that I'm going to use? What search terms might I use in the future to find this document? I've had a thing recently in Google Drive where I called it one thing, but I kept going to search for it with another title, or I thought it had something else in the title. And I would get frustrated because I couldn't find it instantly. And eventually I'd go, oh, that's right, I called it this other thing. One day I just took 2 minutes, actually probably less than that, probably 3 seconds, to rename the document with the thing that I was always going to use, in my search terms. And I left the other part of the title in there. So the title looks strange and long now, but it's because it's got all of the things in it that I think I might use to search for in the future. And it just makes it much easier to find. Now, the 5th topic area is what I've called students can be teachers. So there were 3 people that contributed tips, which are to do with students being able to help out with the teaching, in inverted commas. So Cheryl chimed in and said, acknowledge your students will be more of an expert than you. Call them your experts, and they will become the second teacher in the room you always wish you had. And Belinda and Cheryl and I know each other. Belinda responded to Cheryl and said, I also have them as the expert to go to. And she said, if a student says, hey, I've got a problem with this thing, Belinda responds with, go and see Sally. She's the expert on that topic. And I think particularly young students, they love this idea of being thought of as the expert in the room. So as soon as you know that someone knows how to do something, one of your students perhaps, fantastic idea to say, hey, do you mind if I send other people to you when they have that same problem? Or now that you've solved that out, could you show the rest of the class how you did it so that they know how to do it too? And you could have the student just stand up in front of the room and just explain the quick way to export a file on iPad for GarageBand or whatever it is that they've just learned how to do. Along the same lines, Leslie contributed the tip that it's great to teach your students basic computer troubleshooting. And there was the examples of turning Wi-Fi on and off, or how to force quit a program. And once again, I think I've mentioned my own kids at home. I'm trying to teach them to have a list in their head of little things that they can try out to solve problems before they need to come and see me. I'm always happy to help them, but it's awesome if they can think of, hey, I'll just try to shut this down and restart it first and see if that fixes the problem. Or I'll just close this app and open it up again. Or I'll turn off the Wi-Fi and turn it on again and see if that fixes it. How to force quit a program, again, that's a great thing to do. All of those basic computer troubleshooting tips I think are really useful for us to know personally, but also for students to know too. And if they can do a little bit of that themselves, then it's a great thing and it can save you some time in class. You're not constantly having to run over everywhere and help every single student out because perhaps they're solving the problem themselves. Now, the flip side of that is that and that this is the next topic is teachers need to be students too. And there are a few tips that I grouped together in this area. Buckley contributed, always try it out before you get into your lesson. I mentioned that a little bit earlier in this episode. I definitely do this all the time. Even if there's a thing that I've been doing for a long time, and I'm talking sometimes a couple of years here, there might be a small project that I do in a certain software program or a sequence of things that works really well. I will still run through that the day before I'm about to do it with the group if it's been a little while. If I've done it the day before, I don't worry so much, but I will still run through it if I haven't done it for a while in front of a group, just to make sure everything's still working the way I think it is and that I'm remembering to do the steps in the right order. So I've had this experience where I've gone, I'll just test it out again, and I've thought, oh my gosh, the app's had a massive update that I didn't realize, and now I need to do it a different way, or I need to change the steps, or I forgot that I need to do that bit first. So I think it's a great tip. Always try things out before you get into your lesson. Kari says, don't be afraid to try new things, and if you like it, it may take you a lot of time initially to create what you need for your classroom, but years down the road, it will be all at your fingertips ready to go. And this is a great tip about, putting some time in now, investing time for your future self. And one of the examples that I can think of with this regard is creating your own resources. So if you've ever created PowerPoint presentations or interactive whiteboard, files that you're going to use in class, yes, they can take quite some time to set up the first time. But once you've got them done, you can use them for years to come and for many classes. So my tip with this is to think about what it is that you're thinking about spending some time on in terms of creating your own resources, and work out if you're going to use it more than once. As soon as I'm going to use something more than once, I do tend to spend a bit more time preparing it because I know that I'm going to get use out of it. And if I'm going to use it many, many times, for instance, I often use Peter and the Wolf as an example because it's a piece of music that lots of teachers use, and it's been around for years and years, and it's still super popular with elementary teachers to use at some point in the school year, around grade maybe 4 or 5 or so. And if you want to spend some time putting together a really great collection of resources around Peter and the Wolf, you're probably going to use that for the next 2 or 3 years to come. And even if you need to change what you made, you've got a starting point, and you might just need to tweak a couple of things, or you might add something in that you found in the past 12 months that's going to make things really good. So I love this idea of investing some time and being able to reuse things. Erin says, give it a go. Half the battle is being afraid to give something a try for fear of failure. 99% of learning is failing and trying again, and the best teachers are those that are still learning. Another great tip, and once again, you really do have to just take the leap and not worry about failing. This is something my youngest son, Josh, is currently going through. He's been taking tennis lessons for a while, and he's just started doing competition. So tennis, competition tennis matches on the weekend, and he's done 2 lots of comp tennis now. And he's still really nervous when he shows up, and I don't blame him at all, because neither he nor I really kind of knew how the tennis thing worked, what time we needed to turn up, how does the competition go on the day, who's playing whom, how long do the games go for. He was really nervous about the fact that his serves don't always go in, and I said to him, sweetheart, I'm pretty sure that everyone's going to be in the same boat. And of course, when we showed up for the first day, all of the kids are at the same level. They're all brand new to competition tennis. They're all in their first or second week. Approximately 1/3 of their serves go in. So there's a lot of missed serves and a lot of points won because the serves are failing, all of those things. And after the first day, he's like, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was, because everyone's in the same boat. So I think this is really important to take this through to everything you're doing in life. And I know that for many people, technology is a scary thing. I am still nervous when I'm using something brand new. And usually I do that thing where I've practiced it quite a few times before doing it with a group, because that makes me feel less afraid of trying it in front of the group. The other thing you can do is to tell your students this is new. Don't worry about it. Just tell them up front. Say, hey, I want to try this new thing. I think it's going to be really cool, but this is the first time I'm doing it, or this is a new thing to me. Can we do it together and see if we can work it out as a group? And I think students really like that. They like being told that you're giving it a go. You might show them the end result first so that they can see why you're doing it and where you're going with it. And I think that's a great thing to do, just to show them, look, this is the cool thing I want to achieve with us and with the technology. Let's all try and do it together. So do give it a go. And, if things go wrong, it's okay, because then you've learnt a lesson for the next time, and you'll know what to avoid or what to change or what to fix the next time round that you do it. Now, Doreen said, and I'm going to mention a couple of tips here, which I kind of agree with mostly, but not perhaps all the time. So Doreen said, always keep up on the latest technology so as not to be left behind. Now, I do agree with this to some extent, but perhaps not always. I think people think I'm totally up with all the latest technology all the time. And yes, I do read and I take in things, but I don't jump on things instantly, because it's not always going to be useful. And the things that I jump on more quickly tend to be the ones that get me excited, because they do something better or more creatively than before, or they offer a different way of doing something. So I think, yes, do keep up with technology generally, but I have to say education is slower to adopt technology generally than the rest of the world. And I don't think you need to keep up with every single trend, because not every single trend is going to be useful. So perhaps wait until you can see there's a proven track record with a few things. But by the same token, do try new things as well. Going back to Erin's previous comment, do try new things where you can. So I'll take that one and leave it. And Will has also contributed another one, which is to learn the tools inside and out. And again, I personally am the same in that I feel really comfortable, much more comfortable when I know software inside and out. And I, pretty much know where to find the answer to anything inside a software program. But again, by the same token, you may not need to know everything about the whole software program. You might find that, like we mentioned before, some students may know parts of the software that they might know them better than you do yourself, and they can help you out with those. But I do agree with Will in that having a good understanding of how things work, it will make your life a lot easier, and I think you will feel less worried or nervous about using that technology in front of the group. Now, Alison says, do the work with the students. And she says, creating beats this week was awesome. Now, this is something that Richard McCready and I talked about in a previous episode of the podcast. It was episode number 25, if you want to go back and have a listen. And Richard was telling me that this is what he does in class, same as Alison. He creates whatever creative project they're working with at the time. He actually does it in class at the same time as the students. Now, he said to me in that podcast episode that, of course, he's quicker at doing it. He's been doing it for longer. He knows what is required and what he wants the students to do. So he can complete the project more quickly than them. But he still does it step by step. So if in the first lesson they're only going to get to a certain point, he will go through that and get himself to that certain point. And then with the rest of the lesson, he'll go around and help students. And when they pick up in the next lesson, he will continue on with his version of the creative project, exactly where the students are starting off from in that lesson too. And I think this is really great because you yourself, it can be fun to do creative projects yourself. And I think a lot of us who are teaching a lot and very busy, we don't allow ourselves to be creative a lot, and we want our students to do that, but we need to also take the time to do it ourselves. So not only could you, like we talked about before, do it ahead of class and test out the whole project from start to end, you could also do it with the students, alongside the students. And I really love this idea. This is great in, if I think about art, and drawing and that sort of thing. Some of the most popular videos on YouTube are seeing someone draw a picture from start to finish, with the outline going into the firmer outline, going into shading and developing color and, all those sorts of things. Seeing it from start to finish with someone who's really good at it can be so useful for students. And if you're doing your music projects alongside them in class, they get to see you doing that process too. Now, Linda, who's here in Australia, said her tip here was to take my Audacity course, and this was her first tech anything, she says. So the first tech thing that she did. And she says, take that course when you're 50 and get stuck into loving technology. So I didn't realise that actually was her first course that she took. And she did that quite some time ago. And we're talking a few years ago now. I think Linda probably tell me that it's maybe around 2012 or 13. But I guess the idea here is to learn something new, perhaps learn something you haven't done before, test out some new kind of thing, and get excited about that. And I think the more you're learning, the more workshops you can do yourself or courses you can take. And they might not need to be massive long ones. You might just, even watching a YouTube video of someone doing something cool, you might kind of go, oh, that's so inspiring, I'd love to do that. And then learn it yourself, and it can really get you enthusiastic and excited about things. And sometimes it can reignite an interest in being creative or composing or whatever it is. And need to get into that mindset sometimes of being like a student and seeing things through their eyes and picking something newer. I love learning new things, and I went for many years, I think, without really doing much new stuff. And then in the past, 5 or 6 years, I found that I've turned that around and taken on new things. And this goes for music stuff, but also outside of the music world. I picked up running a few years ago, for instance. I was not into sport at all at school, and I took up running around 2012 or so, and it just became a fascinating thing to me. And joining a group where there were lots of other people who loved doing it too really showed me that there's another whole world out there of running, and who would have known? And, I've ended up running marathons now. So you can take on something completely new, and you don't need to be young. You don't need to be at school age to do this. You can be any age in life. And I think it's really good to just test something out. And that's it for the great tips from all those fantastic music teachers around the world. I really did love seeing what people wrote, and I didn't add to that discussion until after people had contributed, and then I kind of chimed in with what I thought, on each of their comments. And it was just really good to see lots of those tips and how they resonated with a lot of the things that I'm telling people all the time. So I hope you enjoyed those. In the show notes, which you can find at midnightmusic.com.au/38, which is this episode's number, I'll actually link to the original Facebook post. And if you want to click through to that and add anything yourself, feel free. And I'd love to see what else you might have to add to that discussion. So that's it for today's show. If you'd like more help with using technology, I'd love you to come and join me inside the Midnight Music community. So that might be the space that you go to learn something new. And there are lots of online courses in there and tutorial videos and so on. And I'm happy to help you personally. So I'm in there every day answering questions, and I've got Martin who helps me out in there as well. So if you'd like to join us there, I've got a special offer for podcast listeners, which you can find at midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/38. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.